Bonjour à toutes et tous, vous écoutez First Print, votre podcast comics préféré pour une nouvelle émission du format Super Friends, qui est le podcast à laquelle on va à la rencontre des personnes qui font vivre la pop culture et la culture comics par leur travail. Et vous savez, nous, ce qu'on aime, c'est les podcasts longs et surtout d'avoir un suivi de long terme avec les auteurs. Et c'est pour cette raison qu'on est particulièrement content de retrouver une fois de plus Sean Murphy dans le podcast, puisqu'il est de retour en France. Il y a une énorme exposition sur son Zorro à la galerie 9e art à Paris. Et donc, justement, après avoir discuté pas mal de ses œuvres, notamment de son White Knight et de son Creator Own de l'année dernière dans le podcast, on le retrouve pour une émission spécialement dédiée à son Zorro Man of the Dead, Zorro d'entre les morts en VF chez Urban. Et cette émission sera bien sûr en anglais. On se quitte, on se retrouve juste après le générique en compagnie de Sean. I finished. So now is your time to speak, Sean.
I heard my name.
It's really a pleasure to have you back in the podcast. How are you?
Good, man. Been a year since I last saw you. Thanks for coming back. Apparently, I didn't say anything too irritating last time.
No, not at all. Not at all. It was
Maybe this time.
It was a really interesting discussion, and we left speaking about Zorro. I remember.
Oh, excellent!
Because you was speaking about it. You were telling her that there would be a Kickstarter at the end of the year, and so that happened. The book is out in English, and it's coming out in France also. So my first question would be, why did you want to make a comic book about Zorro? What is Zorro as a character to you?
I always liked classic pulp characters like Zorro, Robin Hood, the Phantom, Rocketeer. Zorro is sort of my favorite. I think his connection to Batman is interesting too, where, Bruce's parents were killed after they saw the Mask of Zorro. So I thought, since I've done all this stuff with Batman, why not go back to the original Batman and see if I could get the rights tracked down, So part of the challenge was learning how to do licensing and getting my lawyer to figure out who owned it, making a deal, agreeing on percentages, and making sure that my partner, ZPI, is happy. So it was hard, but I learned a lot. And I think it's just, the more you know is helpful in a career.
But that's really interesting, because when you announced the Man of the Dead, you said that you had bought the licensing rights. Mm-hmm. Was it hard to find the actual owners? Is it not something that in the United States would be in the public domain?
Yeah, so it's not in the public domain. I think there was maybe a case in Europe where someone did a play, and I don't know what the results were. ZPI could explain to you why it's not in the public domain. I don't want to mess it up. But on their website, it says that who to contact, but they weren't interested in working with creators. They wanted just to work with publishers. So I had my lawyer contact them and say, I know you don't want to work with a single creator, but my client is Sean Murphy and he's done Batman. He thinks he can make you a lot more money with Zorro if you let him try to use a Kickstarter and do this like hybrid publishing system and get Zorro out in Europe again. And it happens that my lawyer, who's Jewish, has the same last name as the guy that owns Zorro. He thought it was a relative who reached out from him. And, after what happened to the Jews, there wasn't a lot of people left with this last name. So they thought it was a long lost relative. They might be, but regardless, it got the door open. And he was really excited to talk to her, and she mentioned all this stuff, and it worked out. So it might be that the only reason I got Zorro is because I have the right lawyer with the right Jewish last name.
And is it something that was really different for you to work on such a licensed character? Because you've worked already on plenty of licensed characters. So were there any difference? Did you have more creative freedom? Or
Yeah, they were really great. I was worried that how violent can I make it? Can I make Zorro stab people? How much blood, swearing, nudity? And they really respect the creative process. And they said, we don't really care what you do. They were happy to let me reinvent it. So when I pitched them the idea that Zorro was confused and he was mentally disabled in some way, he had a tragic, they were like, wait, so Zorro's retarded? I was like, no, he's not retarded. He's confused. He had a emotional breakdown. Yeah. And they're like, oh, so it's about mental health? I'm like, no, it's not mental health. Like, oh, so you like Forrest Gump? I'm like, no, like trust me. Like, so I had to explain it to them, and when they started to see the script and the art, I think they started to understand. Okay, we get it now, because it's either a Zorro pitch is either classic Zorro, or it's sci-fi Zorro, or Zorro's a lady with a motorcycle. Like, it's high concept. This idea was kind of right in the middle, where it's a lot of traditional Zorro in a modern day setting. And, really all I wanted was to get Zorro in the back of an El Camino driving around. And, so I thought, well, either I have to have him time travel, which is stupid, or I come up with a way to make him, I just thought Don Quixote meets Narcos would be the pitch,
And also working with ZPI directly maybe opened you the door to a lot of more references, because this book, just like the White Knight comics where you use Batman TAS references, in this one we have the Mark of Zorro, the Mask of Zorro, the Guy Williams name.
Yeah.
So it's really a confluence of everything that Zorro has been. And
Yeah.
I suppose it was easier because you worked directly with the owners.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I don't know myself as a writer very well, but I seem to have a scene in every book that's very meta. I have Joker surrounded by Batman toys, or Zorro surrounded by Zorro toys, and it's self-referential. I don't know why I keep doing that. Yeah, I just like drawing shelves full of toys and knickknacks. But yeah, it was an interesting way to break a character down and reinvent him, but by acknowledging his past at the same time. I just seem to keep doing that. I don't know why. It just keeps happening.
It seems a little bit to me that the story also is quite some sort of legacy quest, which we have seen a lot in all the pop culture media.
Mm-hmm.
Was it also something that you wanted to do in order to reinvent the character and maybe to more focus on the symbolism of Zorro more than the character?
Yeah, it's trendy to reinvent old things for sure. The trick is to do it well, and I think a lot of readers are just burned out on, your favorite idea, reinvent it. They're like, oh God, what are you going to do to him now? Make him a lesbian? So I knew that it would be tricky, but I also knew that the interest of Zorro in America wasn't really that great anymore. But I thought that he should be great, and I really wanted to reinvent him in a way that made him famous again, brought him to a bigger publisher, was worth more money. I didn't realize how big Zorro was in Europe. I've met people my age in France who grew up with the Zorro TV show that I wasn't aware of. So the last few days, I think I've realized that Zorro is a bigger deal here than I thought. It's still a big deal in America, but in France, you just seem more connected to it. So yeah, I'm hoping the sales will be huge and people will be happy with what they read.
Yeah, so you didn't grow up with the Guy Williams TV show. I think you said that you mostly knew Zorro through some sort of copycat, which was the character from the Princess Bride movie,
Yeah.
who actually looked like Zorro. I seem to have recognized him from some time to time in its face designs. Was it something you also wanted to pay tribute to, these old swashbuckling movies?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite artists is Alex Toth, and he was the best Zorro artist ever. And he made his Diego de la Vega based off Guy Williams. So he had like kind of a round chin with a cleft there. So normally when I draw profiles, I have this habit of just going like a right angle on the chin. With this, I had to be like, oh, round. It was hard because I'm not usually good at round lines. So yeah, as far as how he looks, it was mostly based on Guy Williams, but that's just because of Alex Toth.
So you didn't have any more references for the project? Where did you look?
Yeah. For the covers, I looked at Italian movie posters. For the logos, ZPI had a collection of every logo they ever used. So I had a catalog of, I can use that and that. A lot of the homage covers. So Matteo Scalera did a cover based on, I think, an Italian or French, I can't remember, from the 70s. Yeah, but for me, most of the references were just Guy Williams and then pictures of the movie from the 70s. I forget what it's called, but he's a French actor, actually. He's very Republican, I was told. It doesn't seem Alain
Delon? No.
Alain, we'll think of it later. We can look it up. But I thought he was the best looking Zorro, so I kind of based it off of him, except he had bell bottoms Zorro, and I didn't want to do that.
Okay, so when you decided to try to do a classic Zorro, even if you were reinventing it by putting him in a modern era, where did you start? Was it Diego's as a character? Was it her sister, his sister?
Yeah. I think it's stupid, but I just saw this image of him in a car, like an El Camino. I need to put a car in every book because I'm an idiot.
You're car guy. You're just obsessed with cars. You know?
Yeah.
We all have our obsessions.
So I was obsessed with cars, and I'm like, well, if Zorro isn't driving a car, what would it be? Well, it'll have to be like a Mexican car, so El Camino. I thought, well, what if he was in the back? And that's an ugly car. So I thought, what if it was off-road and it was raised like Fast and the Furious? And I thought, well, who would be driving it? Oh, probably his sister, because I need a female character in there. And it just kind of grew from there, honestly. It's just a weird image of him in the back of an El Camino. And then I needed to inject some complexity into it, explain why he's there and what it means to the village and all that. So just a stupid visual is what really made me. Same thing with Batman. I had this idea of them all racing around different Batmobiles. And I go, okay, how do I get there, though? And I end up coming with a story where, what if the Joker's a good guy and he turns everything on its head? And it seemed to work out,
Yeah, because for most people in France, most Batman readers mostly knew you from the White Knight books.
Yeah.
And Gotham City obviously is a more dense architecture. You have a lot of buildings, etc.
Yeah.
I think it's in these books we can see how you use different landscapes with the Mexican nature lands.
Yeah.
Also with the Spanish forts and the pueblo of La Vega.
Yeah.
How was it different to approach this new landscape, this new topography in terms of perspective and art?
Yeah, it was really fun because Gotham buildings are a lot of rulers and straight lines. And when you draw a Western and you're drawing a villa or a castillo, everything is built in stone and then hit with a baseball bat. So I figured out which textures to use: stone, wood, palm trees. I hadn't really drawn a lot of cactuses yet in my career, so I had to learn how to draw cactuses. Yeah, it's easier and harder at the same time, I guess. I think with Batman too, I get to use a lot of black to fill in, trick the eye into making it seem like I did more work than I actually did. With Zorro, there's a lot of white in the background, which is going to be colored orange for deserts or sunsets.
And you also have this idea of the arch. I mean, you have a lot of structures. You said you didn't like round figures, but we will see in the fort, especially, a lot of times where you use perspective with the, I don't know how to say it in English, the round...
the archway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. That seems to be also a new legway for you.
Yeah.
In terms of how you approach the perspective.
Yeah. There's a couple pages hanging that have archways. I got some really great photo references that use that in Spanish forts. I think when I go back to Gotham now, I'll have to start to implement more of that, Yeah, rounder objects, round pieces of wood sticking out of adobe houses. Yeah, never thought about that, but I think you're right.
And in some terms, maybe you could not use the verticality of a landscape like a Gotham City, but
100%, yeah.
But you're still using it, maybe with the characters from the first page, but also because I'm looking at some of the pages when one of the character is being beheaded, you're doing also the verticality of the trace of blood, or sometimes just the form of the sword. Was it a way to just I'm losing my words.
You're very good at English. Thank you.
No, it's like to adjust to the new challenges that you have.
Yeah, I never thought about it, but yeah, Zorro. There aren't buildings. Everything is a landscape. So the risk is every panel is going to be wide. Whereas Batman every now has like Batman climbing a building. So I guess my vertical panels would be the horse on its back.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those. Yeah, I find that's another silly thing I do is I want a character in the shot, but I'm like, I can't see his legs. I know, I'll have one leg up. It's like Jim Lee does it a lot on his covers with Batman. It's pretty effective. As silly as it is, you get to see a little bit more of his legs.
And you could say that in contrary, that if you have all very horizontal panels, that you could just do something very cinematographic.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I guess that you also had to rewatch Zorro movies like The Mask of Zorro. Or...
Yeah. We watched the black and white ones. I watched some of the serials from the 40s and 50s. There's some where Zorro has pistols. They were really experimental with him, even before color. Like they had a movie where he was in a car chasing down cars or something. Most of the Zorro on film seems to have been done in Italy, and it's stuff I've never heard of. They were, I think, using it for B movies back in the early days of cinema. So you'd have your movie that was 90 minutes, but then you would have just a quick 20-minute episode of Zorro, and it was called the B movie. And we use this phrase today, in America at least, to refer to a movie that's cheap. But it started out like Zorro sort of helped create what a B movie was. But back then it used to mean something different.
Yeah, and you also said something about Alex Toth. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yep.
In the sense that your style, of course, is not as minimalistic as his was.
I try, but he's so hard. To be that simple and that good is really hard.
But I think you managed to do it with the sword. The sword play is really like linear.
Yeah.
And sometimes it like cuts the panel in half.
Yeah.
I think you also said you did some fencing.
I did,
learn.
yeah. I took some fencing classes for Batman. It was Curse of the White Knight.
Yeah,
and he had
for
a
the
sword
fight with Azrael.
And I wasn't very good, but I learned how to put your feet, how to lunge, and it's more of it's not called fencing, it's called a foil. But you're basically poking for a point. You're not really slashing. So it's interesting. When I learned a little bit about sword fighting, when I watch a movie now, I'm like, oh, that's bullshit. That would never work. And how do you fight with two swords? There's not really much on that. But yeah, I wanted to get the lunge correct. And there's a bunch of French words to describe fencing. I should know them. Repartee. I can't remember.
And I had a question about the violence of the book, because you said that maybe you had to discuss with Zorro, the Zorro owners, how violent you could be. And it seems you had the right to be very violent.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't usually like drawing violence and blood. I tried to keep the violence minimal. Zorro does stab people in the head a lot in this book. It's almost funny because it's so cartoony the way he does it. There's very little blood, but there's it's not like a Ryan Otley drawing where there's blood everywhere. It's just a little bit of blood. But I think because I tried to make it simple and clean, it almost makes it more violent because you're like, oh my God, how did he just stab that guy in the face and kept moving on? Towards the end of the book, there's a lot of blood because I was using it as a design element. Then you have these skulls images in the background, which are the sugar skulls from Mexico, which are from Day of the Dead. And yeah, you're right. I guess it is a pretty violent book, but I didn't intend for it to be.
Wasn't it an inner frustration to never have the possibility of drawing Batman killing someone?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, I drew a lot of blood in Curse of the White Knight when all of the villains were murdered by Azrael. But yeah, maybe. But
being more serious, you never had the restraints about how you could draw it, and even in terms of I had a very specific question, like, can we really stab a skull with a sword?
Yeah, if you go through the temple or the jaw, you can. But in comics science, if it's cool, then it works. It's science. The science of comics is if it's sufficiently awesome, it makes sense. It works.
Do you find some pleasure in the aestheticizations of violence?
Yeah, I think.
I'm not judging because I really like some good violence shown better.
Like I like drawing guns. I like drawing guns firing. I don't love drawing guys getting hit with bullets and just blood everywhere. I mean, especially in America with every school shooting, it's like, oh God. But sword violence is different because it's personal, it's quick, it's clean, supposedly. So I guess it was more fun to draw sword violence than it was drawing gun violence.
You mentioned the cars, obviously, which is a big element in your bibliography.
Yep.
You're wearing a magnificent 1971 Le Mans jacket. There's also a jacket in this book that's reminiscent of the Cafe Racer jacket.
Yeah.
And another character, not to spoil, that evokes the Murphyverse, one would say.
Yeah.
Why did you want to put these elements in a Zorro book? Do you think like it's maybe a way to invest yourself in a book that eventually belongs to another company?
So why did I give her a jacket like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The signature moves that you.
I know. I think in every book I pick a character that I would be. And I think for this book, I picked Rosa. I thought it would be interesting. She stands out already because she's a lesbian, and she's Catholic, and that's a conflict for her. Other than that, no one seems to care. But I also thought, what if she was a race car driver or getaway driver, and she had these bright colors, and all the other villains of the book are pretty traditional looking, grungy Western villains. And then here she is with this bright orange jacket with these race car stripes. It's like, wow, what am I? This is it's like a racing book with Zorro. And then with her orange jacket and her brother's orange fox, I just thought it sort of lined up really well. If you made action figures, it would be a nice, simple palette for it all. But yeah, usually there's a character in all my books that are wearing driving gloves. I don't know why I do it.
That's your avatar in every book.
Yes.
There's also a reference I found amusing. It's the Trejo or Trejo character, which of course looks like Machete.
Yeah.
From the movies Machete.
Yeah.
What was the intent there?
He just looks like Danny Trejo. Literally, it's like you could have a character looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you would name it Schwarzenegger.
I mean, it's a simple, quick Spanish name. It's easy to spell. I meant to change it before it went to press because Danny Trejo owns his own likeness, and But
I was wondering if you had maybe just emailed him, or I don't know.
No, I mean, so the publisher in America thought about reaching out and asking him if he would write a quote or be on a cover or something just to include him, but it never happened. I meant to change his name before it got published, so I hope if he finds out, he's not upset. He's one of the heroes in the end of the book, honestly. Like, I drew him a lot taller than Danny Trejo is. He's just got a good face, and I've seen him drawn in comics before, but they don't actually name him Danny, or they don't name him Trejo. So hopefully it'll be okay.
But it's funny because Robert Rodriguez, who's a big employer of Danny Trejo,
right,
actually worked on a project for a Zorro TV series.
Yeah,
that I think never got made with Sofia Vergara.
I think they wanted to try again, but I don't think it worked out. But yeah, that would be another reason, because I think Quentin Tarantino has the right to look at any new Zorro property because he wanted to do a Zorro and Django. So I don't know if this is true, but there's a chance he might actually read this, and his buddy Robbie Rodriguez and their buddy Danny Trejo. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's all coincidental. Hopefully they're not upset.
But it's funny because when Arnaud did the podcast with you last year, we were excited because we're French and in Europe, and Zorro is kind of big here.
Mm-hmm.
We were excited to see a new Zorro comics from you, obviously. But then like a few weeks or months later, there was the Spanish series that was announced and developed.
Mm-hmm.
There was a French TV series, Zorro.
I heard, I haven't seen this one
happening
yet.
this year. And in the meantime, Disney Plus is working on the character.
Yep.
So in a way, you sort of anticipated all that.
I mean, I wish I could say I was part of that.
You have such an influence, Sean Murphy.
Sure, yeah. Well, there was a show that was supposed to have Sofia Vergara as a female Zorro with a motorcycle, and I think there is a animated movie that they're doing where Zorro is an animal. He's a fox, which looks pretty good, I think. Hopefully all that stuff works out. I think a lot of these projects get announced and they get delayed or, canceled. So you never know. But I'm glad the appetite for Zorro is still there. I know ZPI wants to keep it going, and I do too. If I can be a small part of that, then great. But I'm pretty sure all that stuff makes a lot more money than I'll for ZPI than I will.
Do you have any explanation would you explain why Zorro is still a character for which we have so much appetite? Maybe we didn't know that there was so much, but indeed there is.
Well, if it gets reinvented every 20 years, then you get generational fans of Zorro. Like Ninja Turtles, it not only was it a hit in the 80s, but they had to have another thing that like sparks it again. So you had generation 2 of fans. Now Ninja Turtles has like generation 4. You have a grandfather who's 45 and his grandson is into Ninja Turtles too. Like that's a legacy brand right there. So Zorro, which isn't as big as Ninja Turtles, as long as there's a new property coming out every now and then to remind people, then it'll conceivably go on forever. Like I like Dick Tracy, but there really hasn't been done a whole lot with Dick Tracy since the 90s. So that's a property that's in danger of disappearing forever, And it's interesting. Like the Rocketeer seems to still have legs. The Phantom, maybe, I don't know.
But you're thinking you're thinking in terms of property, of intellectual properties. But if we just speak about the character and the design, right. Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, so Zorro, because he's such a classic pulp character, it's very over the top dialogue that I don't think would work anymore. You could have Guy Williams saying his lines in the 50s and it's kind of charming, but to do a Zorro now, you should probably make it a bit more modern and mature. It doesn't have to take place in, now, but if you had like a show like Westwood or some like really intense Western show where the people were real and written very well, then you had Zorro there, that would probably work. Like if Zorro was in Narcos, or get the writers of Narcos, whatever, like there's got to be ways to reinvent Zorro and to make him meaningful. I think the icon, just the hat and the sword and the black cape, is just enough for people to go, oh yeah, Zorro, I would check that out. Just like a green turtle is like, ooh, or like a red Hellboy, it's just iconic enough where it's easy to just flick people in their brain and go, oh yeah, I want to watch that.
Were you afraid by putting Zorro into our modern era, and especially against Carter's, that you might lose your readers in terms of credibility, I guess, for having someone fighting with a sword, gangs heavily armed with machine guns and not just pistols like in the old Mexico?
Yeah, I think it is ridiculous to think that a guy with a sword actually stands a chance at taking down a small army. Of course, it's ridiculous. And I think that the bad guys... He also
has a whip.
And he has a whip, sorry, and a car. And even the narcos are like, this is ridiculous. Why can't we get this guy? But, if he's hidden by the villagers, he eventually gets help from Tomas, who's got guns. So he has his own army in the end. So it manages to tip the scale, I guess. Don't forget, Bandito is able to jump off his shoulder and bite cops in the face and stuff like that. So
yeah, we didn't talk about Bandito. I haven't watched all the Zorro properties. I think it's the first time he actually has a pet that's a fox.
Yeah, I can't believe no one's done it before. Honestly, yeah. It's been around 100 years. No one ever thought. Well, I think the idea of having an avatar like that is kind of a more modern thing with the prevalence of Pokemon and anime. It's like a little cute animal helping you is kind of a thing now. So maybe it was time.
Yeah. Did you have any trouble because there's the fox, there's the horses, there's a lot more nature in these books.
Yeah.
Did you have any hard time to emulate these animals' behavior on page?
Yeah, I wish I did my best. Looking around, I can see a couple of foxes that I'd like to redraw. I wish I was as good at it as Claire Wendling was. She's a French artist. She just specializes in animals. It's a whole other science to draw an animal correctly. So like I can draw a horse well if I have a good photo, but I can't really move it around in my head as well as I can a human, whereas Claire Wendling can,
So I've got some questions about the specifics of the publication in the United States of this project, because I'm really a nerd about the mechanics of the industry.
Sure.
So you mentioned it a little bit at the beginning of our interview, but do you remember why you would go for a Kickstarter for the publishing and not try to go for an already established publisher like Image, for example?
Yeah.
Because you would think that the Zorro's trademark plus your name, you would have absolutely no problem to publish it, to get it published.
Right, but you can do both. Why I did it was when I do the Kickstarter, I can make a black and white comic, which in the US, if I go to Image, and I like Image, by the way, they're probably not going to want to do black and white. They just think that color is better. So I can sell an uncolored Zorro to people through Kickstarter. I can make a giant 11 by 17 books, which most comic book shops won't carry because in the US, they want their shelves to be the same and every book's the same size. So if you do a large book, shops won't really carry it, but you can sell it directly to people and mail it to them. So there's a few products with Zorro or any book that I can do a fancy hardcover. I can have one that has all the concept art in the back. Could I give these to Image? Yeah, kinda, but it would be hard because they only sell to comic book shops. If I use Kickstarter, I can make money selling these products directly to the consumer and bypass the comic book shop. So I get my startup money, which for Zorro is like $300,000, pay myself, pay my letterer, colorist, pay ZPI, pay my lawyer. And then I turn around and I give it to Urban. And normally, if I have an image book, they take a percentage of a overseas royalty. I don't need to spend that 30%. I know Francois. I can sell it to him myself. So I'm basically doing the same thing I normally do for image, but I'm doing it backwards. And then for round 3, after I'm done with Europe, then I can give it to an American publisher, break up a 88-page book into 4 issues, sell it as floppies, and then wait 6 months, then recombine it, sell it as a trade, which is sort of what I started out with Kickstarter. So you're making money on the same book 3 or 4 times. And I think for someone like me, this is the best way to make profit, because you can still do the traditional method of like Sean Murphy Zorro in a comic book store, but I can use my system to make more money at the beginning to help fund myself and to pay my team.
And so this means also that because you started by drawing directly into a graphic novel, that you also had to think how you would break the whole story in 4 single issues.
Yeah.
Was it something challenging for you, or is it?
No. With plot holes, I think our writers in comics tend to think of 22-page chapters. So having a chapter break is a nice thing for a reader because you can put the book down. And then, when you break the book up into floppies, you have nice chapters in between.
I think the break that you have between chapter 2 and 3 when they discover the cave maybe seems not to be a real break. Like, it's when you say it, that it's been taken from a graphic novel.
Yeah. That's the part. I guess to do this system well, you need to just accept that you should do chapters. If I was doing a pure graphic novel, I would not care. I would just let the story go where it needs to go. But what I'm describing, the way that this makes money is you sort of have to cut it into chunks. And for me, 100 pages is enough before I decide I want to move on to a new project. Sorry if that answers your question. Okay.
I understood you used the same logic for plot holes, but this time it's a partnership. So how do you, it's obviously you don't have to answer, but do you pay ZPI one thing and then take the rest, or is it like a partnership all the way? I don't exactly understand the...
Yeah, they take...
Because it's with your own label, right. Gear Press Publishing.
I give them 20% of the profits. So 20% of the Kickstarter after I pay everybody, 20% of my deal with Urban, 20% of royalties from Spain, wherever they are. Urban has all languages except for English. So then 20%. So I have to keep records and track of it. And that's why I have to have an assistant to make sure the ZPI gets paid, that there's transparency.
Yeah, because you're just transforming yourself more of an artist, but you're also like a real publisher / businessman.
Yeah.
And it must be quite daunting also.
It's not fun.
It might not be the most part fun.
Yeah. Like I got to be careful, because if I'm going to work for a day, I make more if I just draw covers. If it takes me 3 days to do, so for Zorro, one of the Kickstarter tiers we had was you get a Funko Pop of Zorro that I sign, and I'll draw you a little Zorro sketch. I sold 40. So I have to draw 40 little tiny Zorros. That took me 3 days. So that day I only made I don't even know, $500 a day. If I had done 4 covers, that's a lot more. So I feel like, oh, this is a waste of time. Why did I do these? So I'm constantly catching myself making mistakes like that. But the hope is to learn and get it right next time. I think for the next Kickstarter I do, there won't be as many small prizes, because as fun as that is for customers, it's just as a drag on me, and I'm losing money because I'm not doing other things,
And was it hard to do the Kickstarter campaign because you also had to recruit a lot of your artist friends to do the covers? Was it just you just emailing all your pals and
calling in favors? Yeah, that was part of the deal. Was my publisher in the US is massive, and they wanted to do a bunch of variant covers, and I'm usually opposed to doing too many variants because it's confusing and it's a lot to keep track of, and shops, I think it's a burden on stores. But they wanted to try it, so I said, okay, this is a partnership, so I want to compromise. So I called in some favors from like Adam Hughes and a bunch of people, and tracking all that stuff was another 5 weeks of just being on emails. And that's me losing money, because I could have done 0 variants and just drawn covers for Mike Mignola or Star Wars or whatever, made a lot more money. But the massive publishing really wanted those variants. They wanted to have the big name recognition. So we tried it. And, there's a chance that it might have been worth it. But in the end, I don't think I would do that again.
Yeah, that was my question, actually. The tediousness of this Kickstarter campaign, although it works for you economically in the end, because like you said, you own the rights and then you can sell through third parties yourself. Is it something that we have to get used to for the indie Sean Murphy of the next years? Or are you maybe tired of the whole mailing and the whole gesture process?
Yeah. No, I'm going to do it again. Like, my next book is going to be called The Last Driver. It's basically Escape from New York with more cars. I'm going to go back to using Kickstarter again, but I'm going to do it the way I did with Plot Holes. So make it simple. And then I have a deal with Urban, so they'll publish it in France first, and then I'll get around to releasing it in the US. But I'm not asking people to buy all 3. Like, that's not, if you want to get the oversized, then you do want to look at the Kickstarter. If you want the exclusive Kickstarter stuff, great. But I'm not demanding people do that. If you just want to wait and buy it in your store, awesome. Like, I'm not trying to be greedy here. I've got, 15 people relying on me to pay their bills too. And I'm also, because the traditional publishing model in the United States is in trouble, I'm also trying to investigate a way to fix it. Normally, so when I draw Batman, I know that my value is worth $4,000 a day. So if I do Zorro, I need to try to keep it at $4,000 a day. It's hard to get that money on Zorro. But if I use this Kickstarter system and then sell the original art, I'm back up to my Batman level, so I can continue to pay my bills. I'd like, I was prepared for it not to work out, because it's always a risk when you step away from Batman. But yeah, this new model is the only way I found that you can get there. If I had just gone straight to Image, published Zorro, I don't think I would have gotten the rate that I needed to be at. Sorry to talk about money so much. I know it's crass, but I think it's important to sort of discuss the points.
No, but I wanted to discuss more about that, because you were using the term, and it's quite rare to have artists speaking frankly about money. But I wanted to know, to be quite provocative, that if you were still thinking also just about enjoying yourself with drawing.
Yeah, so I like
not just by the money worth of the day.
Yeah, like, I don't like talking about money too much, but it is important to prove my point, and it's because I want other creators to do better. And if I can explain to them what I'm doing, maybe they can use pieces of that to help themselves. But the risk is, Sean's only driven by money. It's not about the passion of Zorro at all. Like, I don't want to be seen as that either. Of course I'm passionate. When I'm working for a year on drawing this guy with a black hat, I'm not thinking about money every day. Mostly I'm thinking about horses and deserts and cactuses. So I love it. My heart's in it for the right reasons, but my business brain kicks in, and I need to make sure that I'm protecting my efforts.
Okay. Should we expect a Zorro sequel?
I don't know. I'm going to take a break. I will say that ZPI has been so easy to work with that I wouldn't mind it. I guess we'll have to see what the sales are. If they're really happy with what we're doing in France and Italy, the Toth stuff I think is going to be released as well, which they're really happy about. So I think they're happy with me. I'm happy with them, and we'll see.
Or maybe I can rephrase it. When you wrote the story, was it always the goal to have some sort of open-ended?
Oh, sure. Yeah. If you wanted to do another book, you could have Diego and his sister Rosa as 2 Zorros, and she's modern in her car and he's on a horse. It's easy to think of a sequel, I think.
Yeah, and just same question actually, but you still have your do it for them, do it for me politic. Yeah. So in a sense, we just learned about your next project. I suppose you also have next projects with the do it for them. In that area. Can we explain maybe, if not more Zorro, but more Batman or White Knight in the
so Zorro and my next book is 2 for me in a row. And then I'm ready to go back to White Knight and do World's Finest White Knight, which will be Superman and Batman teaming up. Batman's 65, Clark is 20, and they don't get along, but they have to work together to go through a wormhole to get Clark's powers back. So it'll be like a hard science fiction type of story. And in the end, I think we'll create the Justice League using the Fortress of Solitude. Spoilers.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Do you envision maybe a day where you won't have to do it for them, where you'll be self-sufficient enough to just do your own projects every year?
You would just have to do covers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. My Art Adams is a friend, and I was trying to hire him to do Zorro cover, and I heard what his rates were for commissions. And I won't say the number, but I'm like, fucking hell, man. Good for you. Glad you're getting that money, but I could never afford you. And he's like, no, I can still do one for you one day. He hasn't. That's okay. And that's okay. But yeah, I know sometimes I wonder about the stress of managing this stuff. Whereas if I just switch my brain off and just do covers forever, maybe it's just easier, or maybe I'll take a year and do that for a while and see how, but I think that you do make more money overall by building a legacy. By being a writer, you're in people's brains more than you are as an artist. And the royalties, if you're just doing commissions, it's hand to mouth. There's no royalties off of a commission ever. If you just do covers, there's no commissions. But if you write your own stuff, then your grandkids will still be receiving royalties. So it's more money upfront to do commissions for someone like me, maybe. But I think it's smarter money over a longer period of time. And when I'm 65, I can just retire. But to answer your question, I can retire now with what I have and just do my own stories at Kickstarter. Like, I looked at my finances and I don't need to do Batman. But at this point, I'm just competitive. And very few people
you still have the energy.
Yeah.
You still have the will to just to write and draw, basically.
I think it's spite at this point.
And maybe like, also because that you established to the whole industry and for yourself somehow that you are now a writer, also as solid as you're an artist, and so I don't think that maybe you'd go back to just be the drawer for another
it's
writer.
Hard. Yeah, I really enjoyed working with Rick Remender and Mark Millar and Scott Snyder. But when you're writing your own stuff, if your body is like a race car, you know how to drive it better than the other people. And I sort of felt like I was a Ford Mustang at a rental, and people would drive the shit out of me and just drop me off covered in dirt with no gas. And I was like, man, I want to drive the Mustang. So I'm like, well, I don't have to be a great writer if I just know how to drive that car. And, that's part of the fun. And I think it makes the art 10% better because you're more emotionally invested. I tend not to write scenes that I don't want to draw. I always write stuff that interests me. And even though I love working with, Mark Millar, there were some scenes where I'm like, I don't want to draw Roman chariots or whatever else.
But there's a catch to that because you could just like not be lazy, but like you like
yep.
You know what I mean. You're not right. Challenging yourself anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. So maybe the risk for me is I always write to myself cars, and pretty soon it's just boring for people.
Is this why you never wanted to do Chrononauts sequel, because you didn't want to draw Roman chariots?
No, I didn't. Mark hired my friend Eric Canetti to do the sequel, and I didn't know that they were moving ahead with that. I think he assumed my rate was just too high because after Chrononauts, I think I did Batman, and he.
And you stepped up.
He can't. I mean, he could because he's Mark and we're still friends. But I think he just thought it made more sense to let me go and hire someone else.
Yeah. But just before you were starting to say, "I'm doing it in spite of," in spite of what?
Just out of spite. It's if I look at the industry, this is going to get dark. If I look at comics in the U.S., I get to go, you idiots! Why are you running this into the ground? You're not building new customers. You're not paying people enough. If I come up with a system of a hybrid way, I can show you idiots how we can evolve here. So that's a way of being spiteful. And then another spite is I have my own Batman universe. And I didn't even want it. I just did a book that was a hit. And then I did 3 more. And now people are asking to do their own Batman universes. And DC's like, well, we already have Sean. So I took it and I didn't even want it. And this is me being arrogant. It's nice to be like, those people that attack me on Twitter or who think I'm an asshole. Like, well, I guess I am now. But I got lucky and fell into this. And it's fun to just keep banging away at it because no one ever had a career like this. Like I love Frank Miller, and there could never be another Frank Miller because the industry is different than it was in the 80s. And if I can be my own version of that for my time, it's just fun and I get to rub it in people's faces.
Do you think you got there at the right time, at the right moment? With the right project? Do you think that you could do it again if you were to just start in the industry right now?
Ooh, if I had to start now, I'd probably end up as a digital artist. I'd be getting paid $200 a page, which is cheap. I'd have to be on TikTok. I have to be on, seriously, that's what you have to do now. I have to take more commissions. Luckily I avoid these things because I got big before that shit started, but I wouldn't want to start out now. It's too hard, maybe. Or too different from what you just knew. Being on TikTok, like updating TikTok and making videos and having
you're on Facebook, no?
I'm not.
No, but you were on social media.
I was, and I quit.
And people older than you thought the same thing about the social media when you were onto them. So
you have a good point.
We will always be the boomers or someone else.
That's fair.
Yeah. But all right, thank you very much. We can't wait for interviewing you again when The Last Driver will be out at some point, and for the World's Finest. I remember that you had already teased the World's Finest White Knight.
Yep.
So it's really good to see that you're going to do it. Thank you so much for your time,
Thanks,
Sean.
guys. Thank you again.
It was a pleasure. Bye.